The worst thing we can do is to inhibit stomach acid production, but yet everybody's on an antacid. There's over 200 million prescriptions written for antacids every year, and now you don't even have to have a prescription. You can go to the Walgreens or corner drugstore and get Prilosec, Prevacid, Nexium, and these drugs are deadly. People who have been on what's called proton pump inhibitors, it's a special class of antacids. People have been on this for 3 to 5 years. If you just look at outcomes, 40% higher incidence of heart attack, stroke, and Alzheimer's. Well, because now we know mechanistically that when you do this, you completely shut down nitric oxide production. You inhibit the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels, and you inhibit this production of nitric oxide we get from swallowing our saliva.
What if I was to tell you that there might be one molecule that is connected to all disease, from cardiovascular disease to metabolic disease like diabetes, all the way to cognitive diseases like dementia? What if it all has to do with low levels of nitric oxide? By the age of 40, 50% of your nitric oxide has declined, and by 60, it's 85%. And here's the kicker. You can't just take any nitric oxide supplement or eat foods that create nitric oxide in the body, like beets, for example. The truth is, there's 2 steps in the body that have to do with your mouth and your stomach that actually matter. And Dr. Nathan Bryan comes on the show to talk about how important nitric oxide is to our overall health. He has dedicated his career into understanding this one molecule that if we're able to hone it in and elevate those levels in our body, we might even just be living longer. Could it be that nitric oxide is the ultimate biohack? Dr. Bryan has led groundbreaking research and innovation in medical science behind nitric oxide. And this show is going to blow your mind. After, you're going to want to find the fastest way to elevate nitric oxide levels in your body. I sure as hell did. If you want to prevent chronic disease, if you have chronic disease, this might just be the most important show you'll ever listen to. Thank you for joining this episode of Heal Thyself. To support the show, please rate, review, and subscribe. It gives us the opportunity to really expand this knowledge to people who need it most, and you can do your part by just sharing the love. Again, thank you for listening. I'm forever grateful, and I love you all. Let's get started. Okay, Doc, thank you for coming on the show. You are a leading voice on this molecule, which is sort of not even well known to the surface yet, but right. You've been on it. We had your one of your colleagues, Dr. Lou Ignaro, on the show talking about nitric oxide. I know about nitric oxide. I've been trying to tell people about mouth breathing, nasal breathing. Yeah. But for you, you've dedicated your life to this molecule. In the front of this book, I'm seeing this picture. You're holding this molecule. Why is nitric oxide so important for human health, first and foremost?
Well, it's a naturally produced signaling molecule, and now we know, really from the work of Dr. Ignaro, who won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of nitric oxide, that it's a critically important molecule for regulating blood flow, blood pressure, tissue oxygenation, brain function, sexual function. And today we know that the functional loss of nitric oxide. So if your cells lose the ability to make nitric oxide, that's now recognized as the earliest event in the onset and progression of age-related chronic disease. So until you can focus on reproducing, recapitulating nitric oxide production and signaling in the human body, then, the science tells us your body's not going to heal. It can't get well. So I think the message is we have to focus on how well our body produces nitric oxide. If we're compromised, we have to start focusing on things that stimulate and activate nitric oxide production. And then it restores blood flow, it reduces inflammation, mitigates oxidative stress, and prevents the immune dysfunction we see in every single chronic disease. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a big blanket for health right here. Like nitric oxide.
Foundational.
It's foundational. And that's sort of the feeling I got when I spoke with Lou a few years ago. But, nitric oxide, when we think that, we think just vasodilation, more blood flow. But you said something about it being a signaling molecule. It actually creates a communication between cell to cell?
That's right.
Okay. And what is it signaling to create an anti-inflammatory process in the body?
Yeah, I'm just coming from Ventura. So every 2 years we have a dedicated nitric oxide conference.
Amazing.
It's called the Gordon Research Conference, and it's invitation only. It's, we had the top probably 140 nitric oxide research in the world, people from Europe, Asia, India, all over, North America, South America. But it's this fascinating molecule. So number one, it's a gas. And it signals, and that was a new paradigm in signaling, and that's really what prompted the Nobel Prize in 1998 to Lou Ignaro, Fred Murat, and Robert Furchgott, because it was a new paradigm in signaling. So nitric oxide is a gas. It freely diffuses across cell membranes, but it activates these second messenger systems. And so the first kind of pathway to be discovered was that it diffuses into the smooth muscle that surrounds all the blood vessels. It relaxes that smooth muscle, and that leads to vasodilation. So we're improving blood flow and oxygen delivery. But it signals the platelets to clot, and it regulates platelet function. It's produced in our neurons, so it's controlling neurotransmission. It's controlling cerebral blood flow. It's mitigating the inflammation. It's created in our immune system. And so when we get exposed to a pathogen, whether it's a virus or bacteria, our immune system goes there, creates a lot of nitric oxide over a short period of time, and it kills bacteria and prevents virus from replicating. The other important signaling aspects is it signals our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate, to repair and replace dysfunctional cells. It signals the ends of our chromosomes, the telomeres, to not shorten, so we can extend telomere and extend lifespan. And it signals the cells in the body to make more mitochondria, the energy-producing organelles of the cell. So that's just a kind of a short list of the signaling, really the important biological and physiological signaling aspects of nitric oxide. But there's many, many more.
That's so well put. Thank you for clearing that up, because, a lot of people, like I said, think vasodilation. When we start seeing how implicated it is, even in longevity, the telomeres things, I didn't even know that. Yeah. The telomeres is incredible, because people are speaking so much about longevity, and we got the NADs of the world and all the mitochondrial upregulators. What about nitric oxide? What about nitric oxide? So,
well, that's upstream to it all. So when people are talking about, extending telomeres and inducing mitochondrial biogenesis and improving mitochondrial efficiency of oxygen utilization to make energy, if your body can't make nitric oxide, none of that happens. So I like to say it's like a domino effect. Nitric oxide is the first domino. Without you triggering that first domino, nothing else downstream happens. So we have to look upstream. That's what we've done for the past 25 years is how does the human body make nitric oxide? What goes wrong in people that can't make it? Then how do we fix it?
When people talk about longevity and mitochondrial health, then you're saying nitric oxide should be the first words that come out of someone's mouth?
Absolutely.
Wow, incredible. And it's not necessarily in the longevity. I mean, it's there, but it's not like we hear so many other things, and there's so many crazy biohacks for longevity. But for you, you're like, hey, let's just simplify this. It's a lot easier than you guys think. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on things.
Well, I think what we're finding is it makes everything else more efficient, right? So if you can restore the production of nitric oxide, and then you do these other kind of crazy biohacking things like infrared sauna, cold plunging, exercise, nasal breathing, all of that is going to work much better if you can get the body to producing nitric oxide when you do those things that are supposed to activate and stimulate it.
So well put. So I just had the vision of someone taking like either nitric oxide supplement or eating all these nitric oxide rich foods the morning of, and then doing their cold plunge and sauna and all those things.
No, that's what I do every morning. I get up and I sit in a sauna for 30 minutes at 170 degrees. Prior to that, I take my nitric oxide lozenge, and then I go from 170 degrees to 37 degrees for 3 minutes. That contrast therapy, and it's been amazing. I mean, I think it's the best way to start out your day. Amazing.
So then, naturally, we make our own nitric oxide. Should we be eating certain foods to really start getting more nitric oxide? Do the foods make much of a difference in the levels of nitric oxide in our body?
They do, but the food and the diet is really determined by the oral microbiome and stomach acid production. So there's certain foods, and this goes back to probably the late 80s, early 90s. Where, I mean, if you start the field of nutritional epidemiology, we know things like a plant-based diet, green leafy vegetables, they're anti-cancer, cardioprotective diets, the Mediterranean diet, the Japanese diet, the dietary approaches stop hypertension. So about 20 years ago, we started, what's the common denominator in all these really health-promoting diets that have been proven really without doubt that they're healthy and they're beneficial? And people thought, well, it's the antioxidants, the minerals, the vitamins in there. But when you try to recapitulate the effects of that in controlled clinical trials, you can never reproduce the effects of that diet. And I think what the missing component was, it was the nitrate content of those. Then when you consume them, those vegetables, green leafy vegetables, then 90 minutes after you consume them, that nitrate is taken up and put in our salivary glands. So now we're secreting nitrate. There are bacteria that metabolize that into nitrite and nitric oxide. And then we swallow our saliva, and then that nitrite hits the acid environment of the stomach, and we're producing nitric oxide gas. So this is it's a 3-step kind of what we call enterosalivary activation of nitric oxide, but it's dependent upon the foods you eat, it's dependent upon the oral microbiome, and it's absolutely dependent upon your stomach's ability to secrete stomach acid.
Because in many people's heads, they go, oh, I want more nitric oxide. I'm just going to eat these types of vegetables. And that should be good. 2 more steps.
No, that's right. So here's the other thing. In 2015, we did a survey study of 5 cities across the U.S. We went to 5, the same retail grocer in New York, Raleigh, Dallas, Chicago, and Los Angeles. We brought the same vegetable off the shelf. We brought it back to my lab at the Texas Medical Center, and we quantified the nitrate content. Because the question was, if you wanted to do this, how much celery, broccoli, spinach, or beets would you need to eat to get a sufficient level of nitric oxide to perhaps improve your athletic performance, improve sexual function, and normalize your blood pressure? And the answer we got was it depends upon where you live and what food you're eating. So the celery, let's just take celery for example. If you lived in Dallas or Chicago, you could go out and buy 5 to 6 stalks of celery, consume that, and provided you had the right microbiome and you had stomach acid, then that would give you enough nitric oxide to normalize your blood pressure. But if you went to that same retail grocer in New York, you'd have to buy 40 to 50 stalks of celery. So there's, a wide range and variability in the nitrate content from food grown in the Northeast, the West, the Midwest, and even in Texas. And it's a variation between food stuff too, whether it's celery is much different than lettuce, is much different than spinach, is much different than cabbage and beets. So,
yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about your great grandfather's broccoli wasn't the same one as yours. Yeah. Is that relatively true then in these cases?
No. So what we focused on is kind of the nitrogen oxides and really the nitrogen cycle in agronomy, in farming. But if you look back from 1940s to the 2010s, and this is just looking at basic micronutrients, things like selenium, chromium, vitamin A, in the foods grown in America, there's been a 78% decline in basic micronutrients in the food grown in the 40s to the food grown in the 2010s. And so farming practices have changed. Back then we didn't have all these herbicides or pesticides that are killing all the good bacteria, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil. We don't do crop rotation anymore, so we're constantly pulling the nutrients out of the soil. So now the food that we're growing, there's no nutrients for them to assimilate, and the food we eat is really nutrient depleted.
Is that then the biggest concern for our human health right now?
It's certainly part of it. And what I've learned, and I spent 20 years in academia, in medical schools and doing research. What I've learned is that people get sick for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only. Number 1, their body's missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to something that it doesn't need. So that's certainly half the equation. And going back to Linus Pauling, he was famously saying that all chronic disease is caused from nutrient deficiencies. And I think looking back at his time, that was probably 80 to 90% correct. But now, it's not only are we not getting the nutrients we need from our diet, but now we're exposed to all these toxins, environmental toxins, herbicides, pesticides, the glyphosates that's played on the food, the GMO foods. So yeah, it's toxic burden and it's nutrient deficiency. So if we can address those, then the body heals itself, right? We just got to get out of the way.
Yeah, it's sort of in naturopathic philosophy is give the body what it needs, remove the obstacles to healing. And
it's very simple.
It's really simple and complex for people because they go, wait a minute, I'm going to have to make this change to my life. That's too much. Or some people don't even want to heal, So like there's a lot of factors, but this is why I went into environmental medicine because I was like, well, we're kind of being inundated and how can we teach people how to lower that load and then give the body what it really starts needing. And for you, nitric oxide is a crucial component that we've lost over time that is essential for our human health because of all of the implications that you said. Sure. So when I go back to that map and I'm thinking about these stores, and I love that study, is it because just the celery farmed near Chicago or Wisconsin or wherever it is better? Or is there a certain state that has more nitrogen-rich soil that we can start looking for our groceries to come from or something like that? We spend a third of our lives sleeping, yet most of us do not even think about what we're sleeping on. And when I discovered that many conventional mattresses actually contain fiberglass and harmful chemicals, I knew we needed something better, for sure. And that's why I switched my mattress to Birch. This was years ago, and I still yell from the mountains about how important Birch is. And what sets Birch apart is their commitment to organic materials. We're talking about the organic cotton, organic wool, 100% natural latex. And the wool is ethical. And it's a natural flame retardant, and it doesn't have the fiberglass in it. And for someone like me who sleeps hot, these materials are incredible at really regulating the temperature. The best part is every Birch mattress is Scots and Green Guard Gold certified, meaning no harsh chemicals or pollutants. Plus, they make it really easy with free delivery, optional setup, and removal of your mattress. And here's an exclusive offer. You, the Heal Thyself listener, get 27% off of your mattress plus 2 free EcoRest pillows. Go to birchliving.com/healthyself and use the promo code BirchPartner2. We obsess over our food, our water, even what we put on our skin, but we completely overlook something we consume way more, and that's air. Think about it. We breathe in about 11,000 liters of air every single day, and most of us have no idea what's actually in it. That's where Jaspr changes things. They're the first company I found that really gets how home air quality impacts everything from our sleep to our energy level. They take a really holistic approach to home. And we just had a podcast with the founder of Jaspr speaking about how people's sleep scores are jumping from the 61s to 90s overnight just by optimizing the air quality. But think about it, you're not stressing your body with breathing in poor quality air, whether it's dust, dander, mold. And it's not just about filtering the air. It's a clean environment where your body's going to truly thrive. And what I love about Jaspr is they look at the whole picture. The PM 2.5 particles that we can't see, the VOCs from cleaning products or materials in our home, and even the CO2 levels that can affect our focus. They're not here just selling air purifiers. They're actually revolutionizing how we think about the air that we breathe. And if you're ready to transform your home air and your health, go to jaspr.co/DRG and use the code DRG for $300 off. That's a limited time. That is jaspr.co/DRG, and the code is DRG.
Yeah, no, there's many confounding factors, but the whole field of agronomy is how do we enrich soil to grow and feed a growing global population? How do we improve the efficiency of crop yield? And so what we're finding is that lightning fixation, the air we breathe is 78% nitrogen, and that nitrogen in the environment is fixed. You have to break that triple bond, the N2 bond, and that's done through lightning fixation. So what we're finding is that in areas where there's a lot of lightning storms, primarily this Rust Belt along the south, the soil is more enriched in nitrogen. And so we're seeing that now versus, the Northeast in New York. The soil conditions, the growing season, it's much different than, the growing season in Texas. And then, the other contributing factors are, shelf life, what the vegetable is, and then, we've been kind of brainwashed into thinking organic, we need organically grown vegetables. But what people don't understand is to get an organic label, you can't add herbicides or pesticides, which that's a good thing, but there's restrictions on adding nitrogen-based fertilizer to the soil. So you can add compost, you can add manure, but what I do in growing my vegetables is I do soil samples, and I figure out what's in my soil, what's missing in my soil, and then I customize a standardized fertilizer to replete what I need in my type of soil and where I live. But so the vegetables I grow for my own personal consumption and family consumption isn't considered organic because I'm adding nitrogen-based fertilizers to it. But there's certainly no herbicides or pesticides. And in that same study in 2015, we compared to organically grown vegetables to conventionally grown vegetables. And organic had about 5 to 10 times less nitrate than conventional.
Wow. And so many people are looking for that label. Me too. I'm looking for the label. I go, okay, this is good. There's no herbicides, pesticides. But then why is nitrogen fertilizer considered non-organic? Is it because it's a synthetic fertilizer, nitrogen-rich fertilizer?
Well, look, it can be ammonium, it can be potassium nitrate. There's different forms of nitrogen that it's, there's 8 different oxidation states of nitrogen. So it depends upon what's available in the soil and how efficient you want to be in growing that crop. But, the concern early on, and this goes back probably 50 or 60 years, if you add nitrogen fertilizer to the soil, there's runoff. It's, you get it in the streams and the water supply. And then there was fear of methemoglobin, infantile methemoglobinemia, and babies that had formula made in well water that had excess nitrogen in it from runoff from fertilizers. But it turns to find out that was much ado about nothing. That's never an issue. Yeah. But I think the concept of organic is good, but there's pros and cons to all of it.
Yeah, and it's the nuance, right? Like,
That's right.
Because you do hear some people being like, well, conventional has more of this, and organic, it still can have this, and don't worry about that, and worry about this. And it's like, I can see how the everyday consumer gets really confused as to what they should be eating. I always say, and I've been saying this, I wish I had a garden in my backyard or the roof or something, is to grow your own food. So I love that. And we were talking off air that you have your own space in the middle of nowhere and you're growing your own food. But for the people who are growing their own food but don't know about soil samples, how do you take soil samples, and how did you personalize your fertilizer?
Well, the USDA, every community has a local USDA office, United States Department of Agriculture, and they do this for free. You just take samples, and what I do is I take 3 or 4 samples in different parts of the plot where I'm going to grow my vegetables. Or, I've got 800 acres, run a couple hundred head of cattle, and I'll just take random soil samples everywhere, send it off, and then they'll bring you back a report that says, okay, you're deficient, your soil's a little bit too acidic, so we add lime to it. Or you need this much nitrogen, you need this much potash, you need this much phosphorus. And then we customize a fertilizer for that to replete back for that particular kind of soil conditions. I have what's called a sandy loam, and it's much different than black land, which is, a couple hours north of us. So the requirements for my soil is much different than even, a couple hours north of where I am. But that's why you have to do soil samples. So
you're talking to a city boy here, okay? So when you do fertilize like that, is it, when I'm hearing like you're customizing this, does it have to be like that always? Are you consistently fertilizing, or does it take like one poof over all of putting all the fertilizer, and then you do it every season? How does that work?
Usually I'll do a soil sample every 2 to 3 years because again, it depends upon, and when I grow my vegetables, I rotate. So I don't grow my corn or potatoes or beans or peas or tomatoes in the same place. I'll rotate. I'll put the potatoes where the corn was and, kind of rotate them around. So it's repleting. Certain foods will draw out certain nutrients, other put back in. And then the other problem, kind of my grazeland where the cows are, they're poop. So they're basically pooping and fertilizing it as well. They're eating the grass, they're pooping, they're stepping in it, so they're fertilizing as they go. So when they graze, and when they're grazing the hay fields and the pastures, it requires a little bit less because it's recycling. It's regenerative agriculture.
And that's what we hear so much about, regenerative agriculture, and why it's so important to have animals that are regenerating the soil while you can do your own customized fertilization too. It's so fascinating because I know a friend of mine, Zach Bush, talks about this all the time, and I see so much value in that. And this is why they talk about monocropping being such a problem, because it draws out the same nutrients over and over.
That's right.
I see. That's why you have to
rotate.
rotate.
And the rotational grazing, you put all your cattle on a small parcel of land, they eat it, they're pooping, they're fertilizing it, then you move them to the next plot.
I see.
And then, I can tell you, I travel a lot and I eat out a lot. But when I go home and I eat the food that I've raised, the beef that I've raised, that I know where that calf came from, there was no hormones, no antibiotics. We put them on a customized nutrition plan from a nutritionist that provides all the feed to them. It's incomparable. And you can go out and I'll eat an $80 or $90 steak, and it's still not as good as the steak that I cook at home.
I see. It's day and night.
Day and night.
Okay. So something that keeps sticking in my head is I'm over here thinking nitric oxide rich foods, and you got all the nitric oxide in your body, but you talked about the oral microbiome. And I want to shift the gears to this because I went to dental school for 2 years, thought I was going to be a dentist, and then just went to naturopathic instead. But I love the oral microbiome. I love getting dentists on here. It's fascinating. If you have a dysbiotic oral microbiome, are you getting half the % of nitric oxide? Are you not creating? What's happening in the mouth with that food essentially that is going into the stomach? What is it activating? And if you have a dysbiotic mouth, how much of a problem is it actually really causing? So
I'll comment on what we know from the science, what's in the published scientific and medical literature. So in a normal person who has good oral dysbiosis, sufficient stomach acid production, this dietary pathway provides about 50% of the total body nitric oxide production. So that's if you're eating a nitrate-rich meal, that the bacteria. So in order to metabolize nitrate to nitrite, NO3 minus to NO2 minus, this requires 2 electrons. It's a 2-electron reduction. And humans do not have this enzyme. They do not have the capacity to do this. And it's only a bacterial pathway. So we're 100% dependent upon the oral bacteria to convert the nitrate in our diet into usable forms to make nitric oxide. So if you're eating a diet, and we've seen this, and we published on this, I think, in 2012, if you're using mouthwash, or you have an oral infection, or you have fluoride in your toothpaste, fluoride in your drinking water, and fluoride is an antiseptic, by the way, and antiseptic mouthwash, which we've all seen the commercials, this kills 99.99% of the bacteria in your mouth. Believe them, because that's true, and by the way, that's not a good thing. So what we're finding is that if you use mouthwash and you don't have the right oral bacteria, your blood pressure goes up. And you also lose the protective benefits of exercise. So think about this. You could have the best intent and you could change your diet. You could go straight vegan, straight vegetarian. You could work out, ride a bike 20 miles a day, run 20 or 30 minutes a day. But if you have fluoride in your toothpaste and you're using an antiseptic mouthwash, you get zero nitric oxide benefits from your diet or from working out.
Wow. Why don't we talk about this more?
Well, we're trying to make this more well-known because 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash. 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. Fluoride's in our drinking water. I think now we're finally starting to get some attention because we've known for 30 years fluoride reduces IQ in young kids. It's a neurotoxin, shuts down your thyroid function. And we wonder why we have an epidemic of hypothyroidism and low IQ in kids. So I think now we're moving toward kind of bringing this to attention. And that's really one of the motivations for writing the book, because when people understand this, they have this aha moment and this epiphany. They go, well, shoot, I have high blood pressure. I've been on medication for years. It's still not controlled. Many people have had a heart attack, and they go, all I have to do is buy a fluoride-free toothpaste and get off my mouthwash and support stomach acid production. Yeah. And sometimes it's that simple.
Wow. And to think how many people do have those fluoride-rich toothpastes and all the colors of the rainbow of mouthwash. It's just mind-blowing to me, because I was one of those people in college, until I started getting into this. And then in dental school, it's like they push that. Yeah. They push that. Like this is something that they need, and they're totally pro fluoride in dental school. At least the one that I went to.
Yeah, but I think we're turning the corner there. I spoke before the American Dental Association in Chicago back in, I think, June or July. And we just meet along with, probably a dozen other speakers. And I think we finally get their attention, because you have to go back. What I always do is, why are we doing this? What was the impetus to start antiseptic mouth rinse? What was the impetus for putting fluoride in our drinking water and fluorinated toothpaste? And if you go back 100 years ago, it started this whole oral systemic link. The recognition that people with poor oral hygiene, oral pathogens, you could pick up those oral pathogens in the thrombus that caused sudden cardiac death. So they had a heart attack, they kind of biopsied the thrombus, and there were pathogenic oral bacteria in the blood clot that caused them to die from a heart attack. And that was the first. So there's translocation of pathogens, bleeding gums, it's a problem. And you get translocation of bacteria, causes systemic inflammation, plaque instability, plaque rupture, and that's heart attack or stroke. So their thought process then was, well, let's use an antibiotic. Let's use an antiseptic. Let's kill all the bacteria. And again, this was 100 years ago, before it was ever discovered that we have a microbiome. There's bacteria that live in and on our body that are doing things that the human body needs. So when I ask the question, they go, why are we doing this? They go, what's the way we've always done it? And I go, well, that's the worst answer that you could ever give anybody. To any, I don't care what the question is. That's the worst answer you could ever say. So now we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we selectively kill the oral pathogens while supporting the non-pathogenic commensal bacteria? And we've solved that riddle. And so we've created a nitric oxide biome-friendly toothpaste and mouth rinse now that we'll have out in a month or so to address that, for dental medicine, to specifically eradicate the pathogens. But it's not an atomic bomb you're throwing in your mouth and killing everything.
Amazing. That toothpaste, is it going to be out soon? Or
it's called Cardio Smile. It'll be out probably maybe about a month.
I put it on pre-order right now, because I really, I love
it's being manufactured as we speak.
I love that. Have a manufacturer right here straight to me. I really want to try this. This is amazing. Let's go to the step of the stomach acid. Well, one, and why do you find that people lack stomach acid? And then what happens from the mouth to the stomach with the nitric oxide byproducts to activate it. And then after the stomach is it's signaling the whole body what's happening. Because there's a lot of people with low stomach acid and they don't even really know it.
That's right. No, it all starts, and I was trained as a biochemist and physiologist. So once I learned kind of human physiology, especially gastrointestinal physiology, my first thought was the worst thing we can do is to inhibit stomach acid production. But yet there's everybody's on an antacid. There's over 200 million prescriptions written for antacids every year. And now you don't even have to have a prescription. You can go to the Walgreens or corner drugstore and get Prilosec, Prevacid, Nexium. And these drugs are deadly. Because what we find, this data started coming out about 2014, 2015. Just in prospective studies, people who have been on what's called proton pump inhibitors, it's a special class of antacids. People have been on this for 3 to 5 years. If you just look at outcomes, 40% higher incidence of heart attack, stroke, and Alzheimer's. And so how can suppressing stomach acid production cause heart attack, stroke, and Alzheimer's? Well, because now we know mechanistically that when you do this, you completely shut down nitric oxide production. You inhibit the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels, and you inhibit this production of nitric oxide we get from swallowing our saliva. And that's just part of the story. The other thing is you start to develop food allergies because we need stomach acid to break down proteins into amino acids. So humans are not designed to incorporate foreign protein, whether it's a plant protein or an animal protein. Right? We have to break that protein into the constituent amino acids. We take those amino acids into the cell, and then we make human proteins. But this is dependent upon stomach acid. And if you can't make stomach acid, you can't break down proteins. Now you've got peptide fragments that are absorbed across the gut. You make antibodies against them, and that's foodborne allergies. And plus, the acid-base balance in the entire body is dependent upon the acid dump from the stomach into the duodenum. So the exocrine pancreas can now secrete sodium bicarb, which buffers the entire body.
So if it's not acidic enough, the whole body knows by the time it gets to the small intestine.
That's right. And you can't absorb things like calcium without stomach acid. You can't absorb iron. You can't absorb B vitamins. You can't absorb magnesium, selenium, chromium, iodine. I mean, it creates a condition of total nutrient deficiency. And we wonder why Americans are sick. Yeah, biggest problem. And people were relying on it so bad. I remember when the research came out on that, I was like, I knew that this stuff, because when we see naturopathic medicine, we try to optimize the stomach acid. Sure.
And there's so many people who are reliant on these things, maybe less so after that, but there's still people saying, oh, I have heartburn. I need to take this because it's the only thing that really treats my heartburn. Well, you have to understand what causes heartburn. And again, the body is much smarter than we are. I don't care how smart you are, the body's much smarter. So reflux disease is caused from insufficient stomach acid. And let's think about this. So the body, again, if we ingest something that's infectious or foreign, the body tries to get rid of it, right? So if we eat something, a piece of lettuce that has E. coli on it, what happens? We start vomiting, we throw up, and eventually it makes its way down the tract, and then we get secretory diarrhea. That's the body's response. I got to get this out of me. This is toxic. I don't like it. When we eat animal protein or plant protein or anything that the human body doesn't recognize as itself, it tries to get rid of it. So if we don't make sufficient stomach acid, we can't break down that protein into amino acids. The body sees it as a foreign antigen, makes an antibody against it, and it tries to get rid of it. So this expectoration that we see is the body trying to get this out of me. I don't like it. Get it out of me. And so, they may have a little bit of acid in there, but it's enough to burn the esophagus and cause reflux. So in that condition, you don't need an antacid. You need acid. And so you can completely overcome that by taking apple cider vinegar, which is acetic acid, flavored acetic acid. And now you acidify the lumen of the stomach. You can digest your food, absorb nutrients, and the reflux goes away. You talked to a gastroenterologist 10 years ago. they're saying, no,
Oh, they'd
you
wanna-
need to get on
Yeah,
these
wrap me up and
PPIs.
put me in a rubber room.
Right. Put you in a rubber room. You'd be like, you'll know this in 10 years. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it's the truth. Like this is what we do in naturopathic medicine. We give the stomach acid. We suggest the apple cider vinegars, bitters, something to get things going in the stomachs before. And people notice, wow, my heartburn went away, but I don't understand. But you just explained the mechanism, which is that's incredible. Now, you mentioned something about the brain, blood flow to the brain, even predispositions to things like dementias.
Yeah.
If I'm here and I'm not eating nitric oxide rich foods, okay. But let's say I am, but my oral microbiome is a mess, and I've taken all the fluoride toothpaste and all the mouthwashes. Okay, but let's say that's good. And then my stomach acid, that's not that good. Let's say I'm not creating enough nitric oxide. Is that affecting my mental health? We talk about physical, but what about mental health? Can that be affected by poor nitric oxide levels in the body?
Absolutely. It's been demonstrated for many years. So what I like to do is I like to start with kind of important clinical observations, right? What do we know clinically? And then let's work backwards, figure out the mechanism, and then you can start addressing kind of poorly managed chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
So with these new imaging modalities, like the SPECT scans, I follow the work of Daniel Lehman, who has the largest database of SPECT scans. So this is non-invasive imaging of the brain. And really what it tells us is how well perfused different parts of the brain are. And in any neurological disease, whether it's bipolar, autism spectrum disorder, addictive disorders, vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, you name it, the hallmark of that is reduced blood flow. So there's what's called focal ischemia. Ischemia means no blood flow. And so what happens then, if you can't get, and it's because the body's not making nitric oxide, so you get a chronic constriction of blood vessels. And if you can't get the good stuff in and take out the trash, you get inflammation, oxidative stress, immune dysfunction. You get misfolding of proteins. That's tau tangles and amyloid plaque.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we call Alzheimer's. Mm. But even more, now we know that Alzheimer's and dementia is diabetes type 3. Mm-hmm. So not only is there decreased blood flow to the brain, there's insulin resistance in the neurons in the brain. And we published in 2011, I believe, that nitric oxide is part of insulin signaling. So when insulin is released, it binds to insulin receptors and it signals this intracellular cascade. And then eventually GLUT4, the cytosolic protein, goes to the membrane and brings in glucose. So the disconnect was from insulin binding to GLUT4, what happens? Well, we solved that riddle and said, well, insulin signaling activates AMP kinase, which is the target of metformin, and then that signals the enzyme to make nitric oxide. But if that enzyme isn't working, we don't make nitric oxide, GLUT4 never gets the signal, and we call that insulin resistance. So now if we can give nitric oxide or restore nitric oxide production in the cell, you improve insulin sensitivity, you improve glucose uptake, and now we're addressing the metabolic phenotype of Alzheimer's and dementia.
Wow. Is this being talked about as one of the main mechanisms of Alzheimer's and dementia?
Yeah, Alzheimer's is now considered a metabolic disease. It's diabetes type 3.
Yeah.
And what is metabolic disease? It's decreased blood flow, it's insulin resistance, and you get the inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. So those are the kind of the 5 hallmarks of Alzheimer's and really any metabolic disease. And fortunately for us, nitric oxide corrects all of this. It improves blood flow, improves insulin sensitivity and glucose uptake, and it completely eliminates the inflammation, immune dysfunction, and oxidative stress.
I want to tell the viewers and listeners, listen, this is mind-blowing to me because I didn't know about the implication of nitric oxide and insulin, which goes back to even the longevity piece that we were talking about. And it's incredible. I mean, like, I have such reverence now for nitric. Now I know why you wrote a book on it.
Yeah, more people need to know about this, right?
More people need to know about it. Why is that enzyme for nitric oxide, why for some people isn't it working to the highest level?
Well, most of the time it's exposure to oxidants and a high oxidant inflammatory diet. There's some genetic predisposition. So we have these things called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs. And so some people have a heterozygous or homozygous SNP in the enzyme that makes nitric oxide. So that enzyme isn't expressed, and if it even may be expressed, it's not functional, and it becomes uncoupled. But for most people who don't have that SNP, it's just because the rate limiting step in the function of that enzyme is when we oxidize a molecule called tetrahydrobiopterin, or BH4. So BH4 oxidation leads to NOS uncoupling. Now we get a disruption in the flow of electrons, and now that enzyme produces superoxide, an oxygen radical, instead of nitric oxide. So when that happens, we're producing more oxidative stress and exacerbating the underlying condition.
That's genetic foundation?
It's partly genetic and partly environmental.
Environmental, okay. And on top of that, people with poor stomach acid, lifestyle stuff, stress levels.
Magnesium is required to make nitric oxide.
Yeah.
You can't absorb magnesium if you're on antacids. Iron, we need iron. We can't absorb iron. If you're anemic, you can't make nitric oxide. We need oxygen. If you have poor blood flow and you're hypoxic, you can't make nitric oxide. So all of these things are starting contributing to the downfall of nitric oxide production and then leading to this rapid onset of chronic disease.
Speaking about oxygenation then, what about nasal breathing or mouth breathing? Is this something that you talk about?
It is, and it's the same enzyme that's in our endothelial cells is also in our epithelial cells. So the epithelial cells line the upper airways of the sinuses. And so just as you can activate the enzyme in the endothelial cells, there are mechanoreceptors on these epithelial cells that when we're doing deep breathing or nasal breathing, that activates nitric oxide production. But most importantly, that enzyme has to be functional. So if you have what we call endothelial dysfunction, you have epithelial dysfunction. And we've been able to measure this in young, healthy kids. When they do nasal breathing, we can detect a lot more nitric oxide coming out of the exhaled breath, either through the nasal sinuses or in the mouth. Older people who have endothelial dysfunction, they can do that same deep breathing, but there's no nitric oxide. It's because that enzyme isn't functional. So we have to focus on restoring the function of that enzyme. And now when we do nasal breathing, deep breathing, you can produce nitric oxide, you can dilate the bronchioles, you can dilate the pulmonary arteries and improve tissue oxygenation and pulmonary pressures, and everything gets better, lower blood pressure.
So as people are viewing and listening, they go, okay, my oral health, it's great. My stomach, I've never had gut issues, but they want to supplement something. Is there a range of supplements? What do we look for supplements? I've heard nitric oxide supplements, and I've seen even like there's some tablets, there's lozenges, there's capsules. How do we even know that we're getting something real?
Look, it's the wild, wild west. The supplement industry is, there's a law passed, I think in the 90s called the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, or DSHEA, we call it. And that allowed for supplement companies, you could market supplement companies to support normal structure and function of the human body. Obviously, you can't make drug claims. So what that allowed, all these companies out there can basically say the same thing, right? And once upon a time, I think that was fine, right? So if you're a magnesium supplement, all you had to do was demonstrate that the amount of magnesium you have in that bottle that you say is on the label can actually be demonstrated and tested to show that it has that. But nitric oxide is different. It's a gas. And nitric oxide is not an ingredient, right? We can't put it in a capsule. We can't put it in liquid. It's a gas. So all these products that were originally marketed as nitric oxide that really flooded the market after 1998 when the Nobel Prize was awarded were designed to give the body L-arginine or amino acids and precursors that the body could then convert into nitric oxide. But when you don't understand the complexity of the biochemistry and the enzymology, one who knows, well, that makes no sense. Because we're never out of arginine, right? So it makes no sense to supplement arginine. And arginine is never the rate-limiting step in the production of nitric oxide. What happens is you've lost the ability to convert that arginine to nitric oxide. And many times giving more makes the person worse. You're driving superoxide production if you're don't have the enzyme functional. So what I said, there's three classes of nitric oxide supplements. There's the arginine citrulline-based products, and I tell people just save your money. Those are useless. These are semi-essential amino acids. Your body's never deficient. Number two are the beet-based products. Beets became a hero vegetable in 2012 Olympic Games when it was realized that all these Olympic athletes were drinking liters of beetroot juice, and because there was a nitric oxide component. So now there's dozens of hundreds of beet powders, and I've tested these, and the majority of them have no nitric oxide activity whatsoever. We call them dead beets. Wow. It's a dead beet product. The only thing they do is turn your pee and your poop pink and red, and they can get a bleed. And then now there's these nitrate capsules, these potassium nitrate capsules that people are, implicating the NOS pathway, the nitrate pathway. But again, if you don't have the right oral bacteria, you don't have stomach acid, nitrate is inert, right? If we consume it and it's not activated by the bacteria, We excrete it in our sweat, we excrete it in our urine, we excrete it in our feces, completely unchanged. So you don't get a benefit from that. And who is that? That's anybody who uses fluoride, anybody who lives in a municipality where there's fluoride in their drinking water, or the water they bathe in, the water they cook in, and it's people on antacids. And that's probably more than 90% of the population. So years ago, I started developing product technology. My goal was to develop safe and effective drug therapy. Because in academic medicine, we're charged with understanding the mechanism of disease to where we could start to develop rational therapies, safe and effective therapies. And looking at this wild, wild west of the supplement, I go, how can I differentiate what I do with what everybody else does? And so several years ago, I coined a term and trademarked nutraceuticals. So nutraceuticals are nutrients designed to provide benefit. Nutraceuticals, nitric, provides nitric oxide. So everything that I do is, the philosophy is, if your body can't make nitric oxide, then I got to give it to you. So all of our products produce nitric oxide gas. And in 2007, we discovered that nitric oxide is a hormone. Now think about hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
If you're a man with low testosterone and you go to your doctor, does he give you DHEA and hope your body can make testosterone? No, you would laugh at him. It's the same philosophy. If you're nitric oxide deficient, I can't give you precursors and hope your body can make it.
Yeah.
You're deficient because your body can't make it. Yeah. So if you're low testosterone, we give you testosterone, the actual molecule. And it's the same with nitric oxide. If you're low in NO, then I got to give you nitric oxide. Your body's not able to make it. So we do this through an orally disintegrating tablet. We provide about 20 parts per million NO gas over 5 to 6 minutes. I created a fermented beet powder that's not dependent upon the microbiome, so we've pre-converted it for you. So now when you put it in water, it produces NO gas, and you got to consume it immediately. And then I make a topical line of nitric oxide products for skincare. And now we're developing nitric oxide releasing drugs for heart disease, Alzheimer's, topical drugs for diabetic ulcers, non-healing wounds. And it'll change medicine. I'm mind blown on this, man. This is, I love your heart, but I love your research too. And you want to bring out safe, efficacious products that people can use that actually work. Like, I'm thinking about the beetroot powder. I remember years ago, I was taking it when I was working out, and I was like, I remember my red drink I'd take before the gym. And it probably caused a lot of diarrhea and gastric discomfort.
I didn't know if I noticed anything different, so I stopped using it. I was like, okay, well, we know that like beets help with this, but now we're getting to the nuance, and in this conversation, we understand, hey, listen, that might not, one, it could be dead beet powder, or two, you might not be converting it properly in your system.
Well, that's what consumers are confused. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I don't watch TV, but when I do watch TV, I see these commercials, and I go, I mean, if this even confuses me, someone that's not informed in the trenches of the science and understand this can't work. There's no way this can work. And so that was really my motivation that, look, number one, consumers need to know what are they doing to destroy natural nitric oxide production. Stop doing that and then start doing things that promote it. But we're programmed to take a pill, right? Yeah. Nobody wants to change their diet. Nobody wants to stop what they're doing. They want to take a pill to feel better. And even though we've made a lot of progress and our products are amazing, it's not a silver bullet, right? We're seeing remarkable effects by giving nitric oxide gas, but you still got to do a little work and change your habits. And that's why I develop these products, because consumers deserve to know and trust that the products they're buying do what they say they're going to do. And in the supplement industry, that doesn't always happen. In fact, most of the time it doesn't happen.
It's Wild West, man.
It's the Wild, Wild West.
It's a Wild West. Okay. What's the name of the supplements? What's the name of your book? Where do we find all of this? Where do we find more of you? All the information.
So the supplements, we make a line of products called N101. It's the letter N, the number one, letter O, number one. So N101.com. I try to take people to I've got an educational website. I'm not, it's not selling you products. I'm not here to sell you products. I'm here to provide you information to where you can make informed decisions on what you buy. But drnathansbryan.com is an educational website. I do a monthly blog. I've got a YouTube channel. We provide a lot of content, education. We'll put this on a YouTube channel. Dr. Nathan S. Bryan Nitric Oxide on YouTube. I think Instagram is Dr. Nathan S. Bryan. LinkedIn's Dr. Nathan S. Bryan. Twitter or X, I'm Dr. Nitric. But no, the book, this has been a 2-year process. I've published over 100 scientific papers. I've written medical textbooks. But I think the gap in the knowledge and the transformation or the translation of science to consumers has been lacking because most people don't go to PubMed.
That's right.
And read scientific journals and scientific articles. So what I've tried to do is take 30 years of research and tell the history of nitric oxide, what it is, what it does, what led to the Nobel Prize. And then kind of I've intertwined a personal story in there of what discoveries we made, observations we made early on that kind of made us pivot and change the way we designed the next experiments that really led to some really seminal discoveries in what we know about nitric oxide today. But the motivation is twofold. Number one, to tell people the story of nitric oxide, bring awareness, and to take these very simple steps. Throw in some more green leafy vegetables, get rid of fluoride, stop using your mouthwash, get off antacids, eat a balanced diet in moderation. We got to move, get some sunlight, basic nutrients, detoxification, restore nitric oxide production, and your body responds.
Yeah, beautiful. Is the book out?
The book will officially launch February 24th, but you can go to nathansbook.com. We got pre-sale links. You can get it anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. But February 24th is the official launch date.
Yeah, and my favorite part, you're helping break down like science that is kind of difficult for a lot of people to understand these mechanisms, but putting it in a way that's really easy for us to understand.
Well, that's why it was a 2-year project, right? I'm used to writing technical scientific articles, and to translate that really complex biochemistry and science into something that's, I think, easily digestible and palatable and make it understandable has been a challenge. But I'm proud of it. The publisher has really been supportive of this, and we're going to do our best to get that out there because I think this is truly one of those things that what you don't know can kill you. And now with the information in this book, I think we're going to make a big splash.
I believe that too. I got to really, again, for your heart, your knowledge, your passion in one molecule, like we don't necessarily always see that, but a passion, one molecule, but you're so deeply versed in it. And bringing the awareness to us is awesome. Like, I'm thinking to myself, I need some nitric oxide right now, and I'm going to get my hands on some ASAP. So thank you for joining the show. The farming practices, the mental health, it's like such a complete show. I feel so happy. Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you.